This week on the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling, we have a very special guest as professional wrestler Harley T. Morris of the KSWA and Black Diamond Wrestling joins us here. That's tonight's episode of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. Back once again, your host, Sean Meyers, coming to you for the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. And as I mentioned, we have a first, as our first professional wrestler joining us, Harley T. Morris. First off, Harley, we appreciate it. Very glad we could get this set up. And I want to thank Matt Vandriak as well, a former guest on the show, for kind of making this happen. So thanks for taking the time out of your week.
Oh, yeah, definitely. Always a pleasure. Always a pleasure.
So the first thing I do anytime I have a guest on, and it started with some of my co-hosts and then into Matt Vandriak and Bobby O, a man that you know very well, I always ask, how did you get into professional wrestling? How did you first become a fan of sports entertainment?
Well, how I became a fan, I really don't remember because I was very, very young. My dad was a big wrestling fan growing up, at least I believe he was. And I have a distinct memory of having two TVs set up because I was born in 93. So when I got around the right age, Monday Night War was going on, and we'd have two TVs set up in our living room, one with WCW, one with Monday Night Raw. Could not tell you what happened on the shows, but I do distinctly remember both shows going on at the same time. That's kind of where I first started getting into professional wrestling.
Did you pick a side back then?
No, back then I was only like 6. Like I wasn't very old at all to even know the difference. I just knew wrestling, really.
So let's kind of transition into from becoming a fan of WWE or WWF at the time, WCW. You became known as sort of a super fan locally here with IWC, and I know that you and your brother were pretty much at every show. So fast forward, about a decade or so. How did you get into independent wrestling as a fan?
Well, how I discovered it, because growing up, I had no idea how to even get into the business. I just thought you went to WWF. Like, I thought that was it. Obviously, when WCW was around, I thought you go to WCW or you go to WWF. I hadn't even heard of ECW until the Invasion angle, and even then, I didn't know that much about them. And one night, my dad came home from the bar down the street from our house. And he said, "Oh yeah, I need you guys to come meet this kid. I coached in football like so many years ago." And I was like, "Oh, cool." I was like, "Yeah, he's a professional wrestler." I was like, "Oh, really? Wow!" I'm just amazed because again, I was a kid, young, just starstruck. And that's when I met Michael Paris, better known today as Joaquin Wilde on NXT. And he introduced me and my brother to independent wrestling. He said, like, "Oh yeah, I trained up in Pittsburgh at this wrestling school. I'm on these shows every month. You guys should come up, check them out." And we followed him up for a show, and that's how I discovered independent wrestling.
So, quick background: you said you followed him up. So I'm guessing you're south of Pittsburgh. Where did you grow up?
I grew up in a small little town called Newell, West Virginia.
Okay.
About an hour south of Pittsburgh, about an hour north of Wheeling. It's a small little town. Like, we don't even have a mayor.
Okay.
It's more of a village, I guess you could say. And there's not much here to do. It's a little boring, but it can be a nice place.
So I guess that makes it really local for you, the promotions that you work for now, which is KSWA, based in Pittsburgh, and then Black Diamond Wrestling, which runs a lot of shows in West Virginia, and even Mon Valley Pro Wrestling, which is in the western Pennsylvania area. Getting to wrestle close to home, does that really take on special meaning for you?
It does a little bit, especially when I got to wrestle in Newell, which was almost like a dream come true for me. During one of IWC shows of one of their Mountain State Madness shows, when I first got into the business, I got a spot on one of the shows wrestling Corey Futuristic. And it was all right, but I was still very, very green. It was right when I started, and I I wish I knew what I know now then, but I think that's everybody when they first get started in wrestling and when they look at themselves years later.
Well, you mentioned getting started in wrestling. So we talked about you being a big fan because of Joaquin Rao, DJZ, whatever you want to call him. Shima Zion, I think, was probably his name at the time in IWC. And I know that you were at so many shows for years. How was that transition from becoming a fan to a wrestler? And was there sort of a stigma that went with that when you were training as well?
I wish I could say it was easy. It definitely wasn't. As a matter of fact, it was probably a little bit harder. Due to the fact that me and my brother were these big fans, we got a little bit of a reputation. Some of the guys who would work on those shows, they would think me and my brother were just these marky little fans who would just show up and like yell at the wrestlers, and we didn't respect the business, didn't respect the boys or anything like that. So the first place we wanted to get trained was IWC at their training school, and the promoter at the time, Chuck Roberts, he basically gave me and my brother the runaround to where we ended up training at PWX instead. And even then, when I first did the tryout there, they thought I was going to fail the tryout and just go off and do whatever, and that I'd give up on this dream of being a professional wrestler. And they even made the tryout even a little bit harder to make sure I'd fail. And then I passed, and they were like, "Well, I guess let's see what he's got, I guess." And fast forward 6 years, I'm still doing what I love.
Is there any benefits to being an avid, diehard fan of independent wrestling before you become one of the wrestlers?
In a way, a little bit, because some of the bigger names. It's like, oh, cool. If when I do get trained, if I could ever get on to that stage, or if I ever get to wrestle that guy, that'd be awesome. That'd be amazing. And in a way, I kind of still feel that way, because even though I did work for IWC for one Mountain State Madness show here in West Virginia, I haven't worked for them since. And I understand, like, I had a bit of a stigma I had to work through. A lot of people thought I remember even hearing about this post where someone put on the old indie message board, the one that I believe is shut down now, where they said that me and my brother would screw up PWX and get fired, or they'd stop using us. And then Black Diamond would smarten up, and we'd be done. We never work again. And that was about 2 years into the business. Now, like I said, there's other stages I would love to work. Like, I wouldn't mind going back to PWX. Now it's called Fight Society. Just because I'm so much better now than I was then. And I feel like some of those people there still feel like, oh, he's still that same guy, still that same type of wrestler. But I know I'm so much better, and I feel like I can try to help provide more to their product. Whether they'll give me the opportunity to, give me the chances to, that's up to them. But, yeah.
I know you talked about some of your early work and how you're light years ahead now, and even wrestling in your hometown or your village, if you will, early in your career. What was your first match, and what do you remember from it?
Well, that's a bit of a tricky question. Do you want to know about the first time I was technically in a match, or do you want to know about my debut?
You can provide whatever information you want to talk about.
Okay, well then I'll give two quick stories. The first technical match I was in was a few months into my training, and they needed a guy by the name of Troy Lords. They were trying to get him
Balls
over
Hot, I believe his nickname was.
Back in 2007, 2008, yes, but okay. This was a couple years after that.
Okay. His balls were not quite as hot then.
Oh, they were trying to set up this different gimmick with him and all this other stuff. They wanted him to be this, like, almost kind of like Taz in a way, where he just come out and just beat people up and toss them aside. Not like an MMA fighter, but more just like a hard ass, a guy just come in, wreck house. So he comes out, he's on the mic, he's like, anybody here? And I'll fight anybody. And then he points me out. He's like, yeah, you get in here. Let's give you a shot. Let's see how you. I gave him some shitty forearms to the back. He then proceeded to give me a suplex and then a DDT. And I had never taken a DDT before. Now he said, "Oh, just jump into him and by that he meant like lay out. And I thought he meant actually like spike myself. I was fine. I was able to protect myself, and I didn't mess up my neck or anything. But everybody else who saw it was like, "Oh!"
So you're going like Rob Van Dam almost with the DDT cell, huh?
Not as graceful, but yeah, it made it look brutal. I was fine. I didn't get hurt. It really put over what he was trying to do, and I was more than happy to do that. And at the time, like, I was still learning, so any chance I got to be in a ring, and that was my first time in front of a crowd, I was ecstatic. And as for my actual debut, they decided to put me with a gimmick where I'd be a fan who would come in when the ship doors open. I'd sit in the front row, and I'd get pulled out for a segment or for a match or whatever, and then I'd go back and sit in the front row for the rest of the show.
So pretty close to what you had been doing for years.
Except for getting into the ring,
right.
Yes. And that's kind of what they wanted to play off of. They wanted to play off the fact that most of that crowd knew who I was. At least I think that's what they wanted to do. Excuse me. Well, my first match was an over-the-top rope challenge with a guy by the name of Peyton Graham. And they wanted me to get a few flashy moves in there, come down to like the last few seconds, and then he throws me over, and he's yada. So that was my first match, and then the following month they put me in their Royal Rumble style match, and I'm sure if I looked close enough I still have the scars from all the chops I took. But that was my initiation, and I wouldn't have changed that for the world.
And so, time frame, when was this, and how much have you progressed in the years since?
That was, I believe, 2013.
So you were only about 20 years old then?
Yeah, I started. No, I want to say I was 19. I was going to be 20 because I turned 20 at the end of July, and I debuted, I believe, in March. So I was still 19. I had been training there for a year. So I started training in 2012. Made my debut in 2013. And like I said, I know so much more now. I'm so much more confident in myself now than I was then. Because then I didn't want to upset anybody. I was so timid. I was so scared of messing up. And obviously that comes with inexperience. And the more and more I got in front of a crowd, the more and more I got comfortable with the way I wanted to work, with different styles and all that stuff. I became more comfortable as a performer altogether.
Have you developed a particular style for someone who hasn't seen you wrestle? How would you describe yourself to them?
I want to say a little bit of a mix. I really don't like to label myself as, oh, well, I just do grappling, or, oh, I just do striking, or I just, I'm a little bit of a hodgepodge of everything because I like to do fancy stuff. Like I like doing an elbow drop off the top rope. I can do a couple of springboard stuff every now and again. I can do dives out of the ring, but I don't really stick to high flying. I can do a lot of grappling work. I can do a lot of mat-based work, but I don't specifically say like, oh, well, I'm a grappler. You know what I mean? Like I can strike, I can fly, I can do a little bit of everything. That's why I like to call myself a professional, because I can do a little bit of everything.
So I get the feeling that people often develop their style based on who they want to emulate when they're a fan. Was there a particular wrestler or maybe a couple of wrestlers who you really looked up to and said, that's kind of the mold that I want to follow?
Well, that's a little bit of a tricky question because my taste in wrestlers has obviously switched as I gotten older and as I got more experience in the business too. Because growing up, I was a fan of like Kane. When he wore the mask, I was a fan of Raven because I thought that hardcore stuff, the brawling through the back, the craziness of the hardcore title was just insanity, and it was fun, and it was what I enjoyed out of the product. So growing up, I was like, oh, I want to be a hardcore guy, using weapons and tables and all this stuff. And then I got in the business and I was like, getting hit with weapons on a nightly basis, maybe not for me. But as I got into the business, I was a big fan of CM Punk. So I tried to emulate him a little bit. Like I am straight edge. I don't drink, I don't smoke, I don't do any of that stuff. But I've been realizing a little bit more recently, I've been really getting into old school Shane Douglas, like 93, 94, 95.
So like the franchise.
Yeah.
run.
I
So I
moved up
actually
to
saw Shane Douglas before ECW. He was kind of I don't know, very sporadically used in WWF. But when it came to Pittsburgh, he filled in, and I believe he replaced Shawn Michaels in a tag team match as part of the Rockers back in like 1990. So I remember seeing him way back then, well before he became the franchise and the foul mouth ECW star.
But I don't know too much. Like, I know he was part of the Dynamic Dudes in WCW. I didn't, like, before ECW, I'm not really sure too much about his history. But I decided just one day recently, I was like, I'll go back and I'll watch some old school ECW, like old school, back when it was still Eastern Championship Wrestling, because everybody raves about 96 and 97.
So where are you finding this stuff? WWE Network, or do you look elsewhere for it?
I just go on network on my phone. More recently, I've just been watching it while I'm doing cardio, or if I have a little bit of free time at work, I'll throw an episode on while I'm working. My job's not really too demanding, so I can kind of like multitask. And I just fell in love with the style of his promos and his character and the way he talked and all that stuff. And I was like, and see, now that's a character I can because for the longest time, some of my friends in the business were always like, "Oh, Harley, you don't have a character. You're not a punk rock guy. You're not a hardcore guy. You're not that. Like, you really don't have a character." And when I started watching ECW and I saw Shane Douglas, I was like, "Why can't that be my character? Why can't I just be a wrestler? Why can't I just be a professional wrestler?" And it's really been clicking for me recently since I started doing that. So.
What's your favorite moment, whether it be a match or some sort of interaction that you've had during your professional wrestling career?
That's a little bit of a tough one because I have a very selective memory as it is. Like, I have a hard time with names. I have a hard time with faces. Weirdly enough, I can remember wrestling names pretty easily. Might be because I hear them so often. But involving me, my debut obviously was a big moment for me, just because everybody said, "Hey, you'll never get there. You'll never get trained. You'll never, be a professional wrestler." And so for me, just to debut and prove everybody wrong as it was just blew my mind, and it was awesome. Another moment is I got to do a small program with Pittsburgh Dad. And I don't know.
Now, when you say program, what exactly does that entail?
So KSWA does a fan fest every year in December.
Right. And I was there last year.
Yes. They try to bring in celebrities. They try to bring in legends, etc. Well, this year they brought in Pittsburgh Dad as one of the legends. And when he came out, the crowd hated him, chanting, "You're not my dad," stuff like that. So while we're backstage, he's like, "Oh, I'd love to be a bad guy. This would be like they already hate me and all sorts of stuff." So they were like, "Hey, yeah, you know what? Let's do that. Let's see if we can run with that a little bit." So after the match, I was in a flag match. Like, you crack the pit flag over this guy's back, and you'll be a part of Harley's group, and yada yada. And we had a blast with that. We started calling ourselves a West Virginia Empire, and because he went to WVU, he even said, "I don't even like Pitt." So I thought that was hilarious, and it was fun. It was my interaction with, I guess you could say, a quote unquote celebrity.
Hey, certainly in Pittsburgh he is.
Oh yeah, definitely. So that was fun. That was very enjoyable. Let me think here.
If someone says, "What's the best match you've ever had?" what would your answer be?
Again, that's tricky because I've had a lot of matches. I always like working with J-Roo. Me and him put on some pretty snug, pretty hard-hitting matches. One of my favorite matches that me and him did, he had just retired, but as you know, when it comes to professional wrestling, nobody really ever retires. And
yeah, just ask The Undertaker or Shawn Michaels even.
Well, the promoter for at the time, Valley Wrestling Federation, they shut down now, but at the time, the promoter got a hold of me. He's like, "Hey, we need an opponent for you. Could you try to get a hold of somebody?" So I messaged a few people, but nobody worked out. So I messaged J-Ro. I was like, "Hey, I know you're kind of like retired, but would you be willing to do me a solid? They're trying to get me over. They want to move me into a program with the heavyweight champion. Would you be willing to, do this for me?" And he's like, "Oh yeah, not a problem, brother." And so me and him over text put the entire match together. And the best part is I never told my brother, who was my manager at the time, that the match was happening. I just came out in my gear. I pointed out several people in the crowd. called him into the ring, and then proceeded to chop the ever-living hell out of him. And he returned the favor, and it was just a snug, stiff, brutal match. It was a lot of fun. I enjoyed the hell out of it. It really got over this kind of like mean streak I was trying to get over at the time, and it was a lot of fun. So that one definitely ranks up there as one of my favorites.
So you, in your time witnessing, whether it be IWC or other promotions in this area, you've seen a lot of guys come through and then go on to big things. And certainly I know you're very familiar with Elias, being a fan of IWC. We mentioned Shima Zion, DJZ, Joaquin Wilde, and NXT now. I'm guessing you probably at least saw a little bit of Corey Graves when he was Sterling James?
Right at the end. Right. He was advertised, the first show I went to, he wasn't there, but they advertised him like making a big return to wrestle for the heavyweight title. And I wasn't at the show when he came back. And then he kind of like, I don't know if he was just with Ring of Honor or what. I wasn't really keeping up with the entire indie world at large at that time. But then they did a program where Chuck sold off his share of IWC to Sterling James Keenan. And
by the way, did you see that, or did you hear that he referenced that on Raw, that he's called Sterling? He said, oh, I was talking to Cesaro, and he said Sterling, which, like, we know what it means, but, like, 95% of the people don't, you know?
No, I didn't catch that. Right now, like, it's difficult for me to watch WWE programming just because...
It's difficult for everyone to watch WWE programming right now, if you know what I mean.
Well, it's not that they don't have good talent, and I've heard a lot of the matches they've been putting on lately on Raw and SmackDown have been decent.
The King of the Ring matches have been very solid for the most part.
And their pay-per-views, more recently, even their B-level pay-per-views have really been delivering. So it's not that I'm not a fan of the product. It's just I don't have the time to sit down for 3 hours on a Monday and 2 hours on a Tuesday and soon to be at 2 hours on a Wednesday, plus keep up with Ring of Honor, MLW, NXT, all these different promotions, plus go back and watch ECW like what I'm doing now. And I'm probably going to go back and watch like old school WCW when I'm finished with ECW and all that other stuff. So it's just a lot of product to take in, and it's very difficult, especially with me also trying to have a social life with my girlfriend and living a normal life and all that stuff too.
So do you get maybe inspiration from seeing those guys move on, seeing where they were and where they are now?
Oh, definitely, especially Joaquin Wilde, because he grew up in a town right next to mine, in Chester. Chester, West Virginia. It's, again, a very small town, but the most famous thing they have there is the world's largest teapot. And, he grew up in Chester, went to my high school. My dad coached him in football. Like, he grew up in the area I live in right now. So to see someone like him after years and years and years of, picking himself up from, I guess, his bootlaces, you could say, to make it to that level, that's inspiration for anybody who comes from a town like what I come from.
So let's talk about what's going on with you recently, because I know it's a very busy schedule, and it seems like if you go look on Facebook, you're either promoting an upcoming show with some posters or pictures from a show you just wrestled over the past weekend. So we'll try to break this down as coherently as possible, because you have a busy weekend upcoming. On Saturday, KSWA, you'll be competing at Spirit Hall in Lawrenceville. That's on August 31st. Now, people who have watched the podcast since we started a little more than a year and a half ago, they know about KSWA because we've had Bobby O on a couple times, my good friend Bob Orquist. You can check out their website at kswa.net for tickets to that show. You're going to be in a four-way match on Saturday against Lucia Deaver, Zach Hunter, and Justin Sane, correct?
It's pronounced Lucio DeVere.
Oh, I don't want him getting mad at me, so my apologies, Lucio.
Yeah. Lucio. Yeah.
What are you most looking forward to about that match?
How fun, how creative we can get with it if we're given the time, because Lucio is another guy who I've worked with a little bit the last several years, and I'll always enjoy my matches with him. Again, another guy who I can get a little snug with, a little bit more hard hitting with. Zach Hunter, I've been around him since he debuted. Me and him actually were in a tag team together for a little while called Team 12 Gauge. And he's trying to do his own thing now as a singles guy, and he's got another tag team he's trying to get over, the Good Guys. And Justin Sane was actually the first guy I wrestled when I debuted for KSWA. And I could tell a story about all those guys. And so I've worked with all those guys, for the last several years. Excuse me.
KSWA, it's a fun show to go to. I know it's very family friendly. They have a kind of interesting different venues that they work at, and I mentioned this one upcoming on Saturdays at Spirit Hall. I've been down there in Lawrenceville, but they try to travel around and they do some outdoor stuff, and that was evident less than a week ago. Over the weekend, you competed, I believe, it was at Battle in the Borough 2 in Verona in an outdoor venue in a 6-man match. What was that experience like?
KSWA normally, because of the amount of shows they run, and they always try to get guys on the shows, and especially guys that they use all the time. We always talk like, hey, if you can get booked there, you got a booking for life, because it's just a bunch of good guys, and they enjoy what they do and all this other stuff. As for the match itself, it was me, a guy who's still green, Zeke Mercer, I believe is his last name. And Officer Dan Murphy versus T. Ranchula, Matt McGraw, Big Country, and Justin Sane. Like I said, I've worked Justin Sane a good bit. In the match, it was all right, but it was all right. It was a 6-man tag for a spot show for people who came out to have a good time, and it was enjoyable. And I didn't get hit with nachos, so that's
a bonus. T. Ranchel is just like an old school guy, right? I mean, he's a hard hitter, and he's been around a long, long time. A lot of people in this area are familiar with him. What's it like working with someone that's, I would guess, probably wrestling from almost the time you were born?
It wouldn't surprise me. He's always been cool with me. I've never had any issues working with him. Me and him have worked each other a number of times, even once where he gave me the nacho spot in the middle of the match, not at the end. So he gives me the nachos, and we still have to wrestle for like 5 minutes, and I have cheese just sticking to my hair as I'm trying to just put him in holes and grapple with him and all this other stuff. So T's always been cool with me. He's always tried to give me advice. He's always tried to help out like the younger guys. So he's cool. Yes.
So that's your Saturday, of course, as we mentioned, KSWA. The next day, quick turnaround, less than 24 hours later, Black Diamond Wrestling on a Sunday show. And in this show, you're going to be competing at the Diamondplex in Benwood, and it's going against Shadow. So I know that's someone that you've also competed with and against before. What stands out about that match on Sunday?
Well, it's kind of like a mini blow-off. And just so you know, it is for the Quality Rentals Internet Television Championship.
So how long have you held that title for?
I want to say June. It was at Black Diamond's anniversary show. So, yeah, I want to say it might have been early July. So, it might have been early July. Only a little over a few months. Wasn't too long. I'm looking forward to that match because Shadow is a guy I've noticed who he's been around for a while, but he took an extended period of time off from what he told me, and I see that he's getting better. Like every time I've seen him work, every time I've worked with him, he's always trying to improve something about his game, something about the storytelling in the match, or just he's always trying to get better. So that's what I'm looking forward to most because me and him can do some different stuff. And I always try to have a little bit of fun with my matches. Like I usually try not to go with the stereotypical, okay, we do this, then we do this, then we do this. I always try to throw in something a little different in there so it breaks up the monotony of like, okay, well, that happened last match, that happened the match before that, et cetera, et cetera. So, yeah, I mean, I'm looking forward to it. I think it's going to be a good match. And, I'm hoping to continue to have this because this is my first singles title I had at Black Diamond Wrestling.
You don't want to give that up.
Oh, no, definitely not. And I will fight tooth and nail to keep it.
So that's Sunday afternoon, and it's a good weekend. Of course, Labor Day weekend, so most people off Monday. Go check that out. It's at the Diamondplex in Benwood, and for people who want more information, blackdiamonduniverse.com is the website for Black Diamond Wrestling. So I know those are your two biggest promotions, I guess. But you mentioned that you also wrestle in MVP Wrestling, which is the Mon Valley Pro Wrestling, also in Western Pennsylvania.
That's correct. I believe it's based out of Charleroi. At least that's where it's J-Riz promotion. He's trying to get things set up to where he's going to start hopefully running monthly. He's trying to find a stable building. He's still very much trying to get it off the ground, per se. Because he's still trying, I guess he's still trying to find, what works, what doesn't work, et cetera, et cetera.
And you've seen over the years promotions come and go, so it's not always a guarantee that you're going to be able to sustain a fan base and run shows at the same venues. But when you do get that consistency, like what IWC and KSWA have had in this Pittsburgh area, it's always something special, isn't it?
Oh yeah, definitely, and there's enough room for everybody too. That's what I always think, because I know RWA. I've never worked for them, but I know they've been around for a while. They run shows regularly. They use a lot of guys. Again, I can go Fight Society. They use a lot of guys. They train a lot of guys. They have a lot of guys up and coming. IWC runs regularly. KSWA runs regularly. There's enough room for everybody. There really is.
What are your future goals in pro wrestling?
My future goals for professional wrestling. One, become a better performer. I know I've already said I'm better now than I was, when I started, but I never stop learning. I never want to stop learning. I never want to stop getting better. For instance, that show you just mentioned, the one in Verona, the Battle. I'm sorry.
Battle in the Borough 2.
Thank you.
That's why I got everything written down in case I do forget it.
That day, I actually drove to Cleveland in the morning to do a seminar for AIW. They had Raven, and the seminar, I could afford it. It was supposed to start at noon. It started at 1, and I left at 2, and it was a 2.5-hour drive back to Pittsburgh. So it was a 2-hour drive from where I lived to Cleveland to do the seminar, 2.5-hour drive to get back to Pittsburgh to do the show, and then about a little over an hour for me to get home. So I was on the road for a good while there, but that's just because I wanted to learn. I wanted to, attend that seminar. I wanted to just expand my knowledge and get a little bit better and a little bit better, and that's what I'm always trying to do. So there's that goal. Another goal is, I think this is a goal for anybody, is I want to be a top guy for a promotion, because you know what they say, if you're not trying to be the top guy, then what are you doing? I've never been a heavyweight champion anywhere, and that's a goal I would love to do someday. I know a little under a year ago, I had a few shots at Black Diamond Wrestling Heavyweight Championship against Nathan Ulrich, and again, another guy I'd love to work, and I would love to work with him more. And that kind of proved to me, it's okay, well, if they put me in that top spot, I can hang with the guy who's the heavyweight champion. So the next step is to become the heavyweight champion. Same thing for MVP. I'd like to win the heavyweight title there. Anywhere I go, I want to try to get to that tippy top spot where people are coming to see me. They're coming because of the promotion and because they like coming out to see wrestling, but I want to get to the point where people want to come see me, if that makes any sense.
Absolutely. So we already mentioned your shows this weekend, Saturday, KSWA. And again, if people are interested in getting tickets, they can do so at kswa.net. Sunday, Black Diamond Wrestling. Check out blackdiamonduniverse.com. But I know you have a very busy schedule, so what else should we know about what's to come for Harley T. Morris?
Well, I believe I have a show every weekend in September, like I did for August. July, same thing. I had a show every weekend, except for the weekend of my birthday, surprisingly. And I've been getting more and more comfortable with that kind of schedule. I've really enjoyed it because I've wrestled more this year than I have in any other year, with MVP starting up. So then KSWA and Black Diamond running their normal shows. There's even a weekend coming up where I'm going to be wrestling on, I believe it's September 13th, the 14th, and the 15th. 13th in Millville for KSWA. 14th is a follow-up show, same place, Millville Days. And then the 15th is in Charleroi for MVP Wrestling. So I got 3 shows back, and I'm looking forward to that. I really am, because I just enjoy doing. Like I guess that's what you can sum up is I really, really enjoy what I do. So I have a show every weekend, and then a good number of weekends in October. And then November, it's going to slow down a little bit. I only have a couple of shows in November and in December. So I have a couple open dates if any promoter wants to get a hold of me for booking information or want to try to get me booked on their shows. I have some open dates coming up. I still have some open dates in September. I still have some open dates in October, too. So.
And you mentioned anyone that wants to get a hold of you. I've been flashing your Twitter handle, Harley T. Morris, but I know you're also on Facebook, Harley T. Morris as well. Anything else you wanted to throw out there for people interested in contacting you, whether it be fans or promoters alike?
Oh, no, those are the 2 major things. I'm trying to increase my Twitter followers, my Twitter game a little bit, because I'm still new to Twitter. For the longest time, like even whenever Facebook got popular, I was like, I don't need to get on Facebook. Facebook's a trend. It's stupid. I don't need to get on Facebook. And then I got on Facebook, and I was like, okay, well, I'm going to need this for my wrestling to advertise and do all that stuff when I finally get into the business and all that. And then now Twitter's the big thing. People love being on Twitter. I think Instagram is like number 2 behind that. I think Facebook's kind of fallen down a little bit. But right now I'm still trying to get new to the Twitter thing. I post about me going to the gym all the time. I'm usually up at 3:30 in the morning every morning. I'm at the gym by 4.
I was going to say, you don't get much sleep tonight then, since it's a little after 10 o'clock now.
Oh, this is actually the time I usually go to bed, believe it or not. Usually around 10. I'll usually pass out around 10:30. Because how my schedule normally goes is I'll get up at 3:30. I'll go to the gym, do about a half hour cardio on the elliptical, get a quick shower, drive to work my full day at work, go back to the gym, work out for about an hour, hour and a half. If it's on tanning days, I'll be there for maybe a little over 2 hours. And then I come home, and then I make a dinner, which I usually try to eat very clean. I eat egg whites, carrots, and usually some sort of meat. And then me and my girlfriend usually watch TV until it's like, hey, it's about time we got to head to bed. Usually about 10, we get cozy and all that stuff, about 10:30, and then just repeat until Saturday when I finally get to have some junk food.
Well, it sounds like you're certainly very committed to continue establishing yourself and growing your professional wrestling career. Once again, you could follow him, Harley T. Morris, on Twitter, on Facebook. Find him at Harley T. Morris. I appreciate this so much. Glad to have you on as our first wrestler. We've had promoters, we've had ring announcers, we've had former wrestling journalists. And by the way, I do have a special message from one of our former guests, Bobby O. He says, please close the office door. So,
yeah.
Little inside joke between the owner of KSWA, Bobby O, and Harley T. Morris. Thank you so much for doing the show. We appreciate it, and certainly open for you to return maybe a few months down the road.
Oh, I'd love to, just because I got so much more I'd like to talk about, so many more stories. I was on a podcast just recently, and I talked for well over an hour, just my backstory and different stories and all that stuff. And I still have more to talk about on that podcast whenever they want me back there. So yeah, I'd love to come back. I'd love to talk more, and yeah, like I'm this year has definitely been a very, very good year for me when it comes to professional wrestling, and I'm hoping to carry that for the rest of this year and into 2020.
All right, great stuff. Once again, Harley T. Morris. You can check him out this Saturday at KSWA, the Keystone State Wrestling Alliance, or Sunday at Black Diamond Wrestling. That's going to do it for this edition of the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. If you want to follow us on Twitter, 5-Star Pod Wrestle, Instagram, 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling. Go subscribe to our YouTube channel, turn on notifications, get all our new videos, as well as check out the videos from the past. That's going to do it for this week. We'll catch you again right here next week on the 5-Star Podcast of Wrestling.